When the letter arrived, I thought it was just another bill, but inside were legal papers. My husband had filed for divorce, citing defamation and misconduct, all because of one harmless joke at a company dinner. Was it really my fault everyone laughed but him? My name is Verity Lane, and I've always believed humor keeps a marriage alive. I was the funny one, the one who could turn any awkward moment into a laugh. My husband Noah never appreciated that. He's quiet, serious, the kind of man who pauses before answering a simple question. Sometimes that calm made me feel safe, other times it made me feel invisible. After 8 years of marriage, I started noticing how dull everything had become. Our conversations were short, our routines predictable. I'd joke that we were turning into roommates with matching rings. He'd just smile politely and say I was exaggerating. Maybe I was, but it hurt that he never tried to prove me wrong. So when Noah invited me to a company dinner to meet his co-workers, I saw it as a chance to remind him, and maybe everyone else, that I wasn't just a quiet wife sitting in his shadow. I wanted to stand out, to be the one people remembered. I thought a few jokes would make the night more fun, maybe even make Noah loosen up. I didn't realize one of those jokes would end my marriage, or that his silence that night was the start of my downfall. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. It started like any other week. Quiet mornings, routine days, long silences that filled the house like fog. Noah and I barely spoke beyond what was necessary. He'd leave early for work, and I'd stay behind, watching the clock and wondering when our lives had become so painfully neat. He'd once told me he liked peace, but lately that peace felt like absence. At work, I told my coworker Denise that my husband was too calm, too composed, like living with a man carved from stone. She laughed and said some women would kill for a husband who didn't argue. I told her I'd rather have one who acted alive. She said maybe I should shake things up a little, make him notice me again. That idea stayed in my head longer than it should have. That evening, Noah came home late again. He said the firm was preparing for an audit, and everyone was staying over time. I said maybe he should spend some of that discipline at home. He just smiled faintly and said, "You never liked calm." I told him I never liked being ignored. He said I wasn't ignored, just settled. That word felt like an insult dressed as reassurance. 2 days later, Noah mentioned that his company was hosting a dinner at a hotel restaurant. He said it was formal and asked if I'd like to come. I said yes immediately, not because I wanted to meet his colleagues, but because I wanted to be seen again. When he added that his boss, Ethan, would be there with his wife, I remembered the few times I'd met Ethan at work events. Charming, confident, the type who made people laugh without trying. I told myself there was no harm in being friendly. The day of the dinner, I spent extra time getting ready. I bought a new dress, did my hair differently, even sprayed perfume I hadn't used in years. When Noah saw me, he said I looked nice, but his tone was flat. Polite, not moved. I told him I wanted to make a good impression. He said, "You always do." I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a warning. At the hotel, the room buzzed with laughter and chatter. Ethan greeted us first, shaking Noah's hand before turning to me with a grin that lasted a little too long. He told me I hadn't changed since the last company event. I told him that was kind of him to say, and Noah's jaw tightened just slightly. That flicker of discomfort thrilled me. Dinner went smoothly at first. Everyone discussed work, travel, light topics. I kept the table laughing with small jokes, teasing Noah about being so organized that he probably color-coded his socks. Ethan chuckled, saying he needed someone like me at meetings to keep things interesting. I noticed how quickly everyone responded to my humor, how alive the table felt when I spoke. But Noah grew quieter. He didn't scold me, didn't even glare. He just withdrew, like he'd already decided it wasn't worth reacting. That silence felt like a challenge. I leaned into the performance, sharper jokes, riskier teasing. I told myself I was helping, making him look more approachable. When dessert came, Ethan complimented Noah's attention to detail, saying the firm was lucky to have him. I smiled and said, "He's lucky too. Imagine having a boss who probably does everything better, even in bed." The laughter that followed was loud but uneasy. Ethan looked surprised, trying to turn it into a joke, while Noah froze completely. The sound of my own voice suddenly felt too clear, too cruel. But I laughed again, pretending it was harmless, waiting for him to join in. He didn't. When the table went quiet, he set down his glass and said, "Excuse me." He stood, nodded to Ethan, and walked out. Just like that. No shouting, no scene, just quiet finality. Everyone looked at me. I forced a laugh, saying he was tired, that he'd had too much work lately. Ethan gave me a tight smile. Caroline, his wife, looked away. I stayed through the rest of dinner, smiling through the discomfort, pretending I'd won something. But when I got home later, the house was dark, his car gone, and for the first time, I wondered if silence could sound like the end of everything. The next morning, Noah still hadn't come home. His side of the bed was untouched, the pillow cold. I tried calling, but he didn't answer. I told myself he was sulking, trying to make a point. He'd done that once before, gone to his parents for a night after an argument. By evening, I convinced myself that was where he'd gone again. When he finally returned the next day, he looked rested, calm, and strangely detached. He said he'd stayed at his mother's house. I asked if she'd told him to come back. He said, "No, she told me to think." That stung more than I expected. I told him he was overreacting, that everyone at the dinner had laughed. He said, "Yes, everyone but me." I tried to joke, to lighten the mood, but his silence made it impossible. He wasn't angry, not visibly. That calm, deliberate stillness made me feel like the one out of control. I said, "You can't actually be this upset over one joke." He said, "You didn't tell a joke, Verity. You made a statement." I didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, I turned it into an attack. I said, maybe if he hadn't been so dull lately, I wouldn't have had to carry the conversation. He said, "You didn't carry it, you buried it." Then he picked up his briefcase and left for work like nothing happened. That afternoon, I told my mother what had happened. She laughed and said, "Oh, men are fragile. He'll calm down." She reminded me that humor was part of who I was. "He knew that when he married you," she said. "If he can't handle it, that's his problem." It was comforting to hear, but it didn't stop the unease that lingered after her call. When Noah came home that evening, I tried again. I said we could move past it, that I didn't mean anything by it. He said, "Intent doesn't erase impact." I said, "You sound like one of those self-help podcasts." He looked at me for a long moment and said, "Maybe they'd have helped us." The next few days were tense. He was polite but distant, a stranger living under the same roof. I thought about apologizing properly, but every time I started, pride got in the way. I kept telling myself he'd forgive me once he cooled off. Instead, he started spending more time at work. Then the whispers started. At the grocery store, a woman from Noah's office smiled awkwardly at me and said, "Rough dinner, huh?" My stomach turned. Later, my coworker Denise showed me a video on her phone, a short clip from the restaurant. It had been recorded by someone at another table. You could hear my voice clearly, joking about Ethan. You could even hear the laughter that followed before the silence. The video had been shared among employees at Noah's firm. I went home early, furious. When Noah arrived that evening, I held up my phone and said, "You let this spread?" He said, "I didn't have to. People saw it." I told him to fix it, to explain that it wasn't serious. He said, "Why would I protect a lie you created?" That night, he slept in the guest room. I heard him typing for hours. The next morning, his laptop was gone. So were a few folders from his desk. He left before I woke up, leaving only a short note on the counter. "We'll talk soon." But not like before. I stared at the note for a long time, trying to decide what that meant. I told myself he wouldn't actually do anything drastic. But when I called his phone, it went straight to voicemail. And when I checked his calendar app on our shared account, I saw one entry that made my hands go cold. Consultation, 9:30 a.m., law office. By the next morning, I couldn't pretend anymore. The silence between us had turned from tension into distance, cold, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Noah left early again, but this time, he didn't take his usual travel mug or leave a note. When I looked at the kitchen counter, all I saw was an envelope addressed to me. Inside was a bank statement showing our joint account with half the balance gone. He'd moved his share to another account. My chest went tight, but I told myself it was temporary. He wouldn't actually separate our finances. Not over one joke. I called my mother immediately. She said he was bluffing, trying to scare me into apologizing. "Don't feed his ego," she said. "He'll come crawling back." I wanted to believe her, but the way he'd been looking at me lately didn't feel like someone planning to come back. It felt like someone preparing to leave for good. At work, the video kept spreading. Denise said she'd overheard people at the firm calling me "that woman from the dinner." I laughed it off in front of her, saying people needed to mind their own business, but when I got home, I sat on the floor and cried. Every time I thought about the look on Noah's face that night, not anger, just quiet disappointment, I felt something like shame, but I buried it quickly under more excuses. That evening, Noah came home later than usual. I was sitting on the couch when he walked in, still wearing his work clothes, calm as ever. I asked if we could talk. He said, "We're already doing that." I told him the video had gone viral in the office, that people were making jokes. He said, "Then you finally know how it feels." I said it wasn't fair, that I hadn't meant for things to go that far. He said, "Things always go too far with you." I accused him of being dramatic. I said he was trying to look like a victim. He said, "You don't need me to look like one. You made me one already." His words hit like cold water. I told him he was twisting everything, that I'd only been trying to make people laugh. He said, "You did. You just forgot who the joke was on." Then he handed me another envelope. Legal documents this time. "Preliminary notice," he said. "Nothing final yet." I asked if he was serious. He said, "I'm not joking anymore." He walked away before I could say another word. I called my mother again, shaking. She told me not to panic, that divorce filings always started as bluffs. "He wants attention," she said. "Ignore him, and he'll realize what he's losing." But Noah didn't seem like a man trying to win me back. He seemed like one tying up loose ends. A few days later, a message from one of his co-workers appeared in my inbox. It said, "You should probably talk to your husband. HR is aware." My stomach dropped. When Noah got home that night, I demanded to know what that meant. He said, "It means I told the truth." I said, "You told your boss?" He said, "No, my boss already knew." I froze. Ethan, the very man I'd joked about, must have reported it. Or maybe Noah had shown him the video himself. Either way, it meant everyone at his job now knew my humiliation wasn't just gossip, it was official. I said he'd ruined both of us. He said, "No, Verity, I just stopped protecting you." Then he went upstairs, leaving me in the living room, surrounded by silence that didn't just sound empty, it sounded final. The next few days blurred together, every hour heavier than the last. The tension in the house was unbearable. Noah no longer looked at me when he spoke, and when he did, it was with the calm certainty of someone who had already made his decision. He started keeping his things in the guest room, laptop, clothes, even his watch. It was like watching a stranger slowly move out of our life without packing a single box. At work, people stopped pretending not to know. Someone sent me a screenshot of a group chat from Noah's office where the video had been shared again, this time with sarcastic captions. My hands shook as I read the comments. One said, "Guess she won't be invited to the next dinner." I wanted to disappear. I told Denise I was thinking of confronting Ethan to make him tell people to stop. She said that would only make it worse. That evening, I tried to talk to Noah again. He was reading on the couch, calm, distant. I asked if we could fix things, maybe take a trip, start fresh. He said, "You can't start over when you've destroyed the foundation." I told him he was acting superior, that he'd done his own share of mistakes. He said, "Maybe, but I never turned you into a punchline." I snapped and told him he was taking this too far, that everyone jokes about their partners. He said, "They joke with love. You joke to wound." I told him he was being cruel. He said, "No, I'm just done pretending this marriage is funny." After he went upstairs, I opened social media again, angry and desperate. I wrote a long post about how people couldn't take humor anymore, about how being honest was now considered disrespectful. It got hundreds of likes within an hour. For a brief moment, I felt vindicated. The next morning, a letter arrived from Noah's lawyer. It referenced recent online statements constituting continued defamation. My stomach dropped. He was watching everything and documenting it. I deleted the post immediately, but the damage was already done. That afternoon, my mother came over. She told me not to let him intimidate me. "He's bluffing," she said. "He wouldn't dare drag this into court." But later that night, as I was making tea, Noah walked in holding a thick envelope. He placed it on the counter and said quietly, "This isn't a bluff." Inside were copies of financial documents, screenshots, and a formal filing for divorce and custody review. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling. I said, "You really want to destroy me over a stupid joke?" He said, "You destroyed yourself when you stopped caring who you hurt." Then he turned and left the kitchen. I heard the door to the guest room close, and for the first time, I understood he wasn't trying to teach me a lesson. He was ending the story entirely. The mediation was scheduled a week later in a quiet office downtown. The waiting room smelled of coffee and paper, cold, professional, impersonal. I arrived first, nervous and trying to look composed. When Noah walked in, he didn't even glance at me. He looked rested, steady, as if this meeting were just another task to check off his list. That composure infuriated me. I wanted him to show some emotion, to prove this still hurt him. But he didn't. The mediator started by reading the case summary. Every word sounded foreign: public humiliation, reputational harm, defamation. I interrupted, saying this was absurd, that we were here because of one dinner. Noah's lawyer said calmly, "We're here because of a pattern." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, copies of my social media posts, and written witness statements. My name was underlined on each page. I tried to laugh it off, saying people were exaggerating. Noah said quietly, "You did the exaggerating for them." I said he was just trying to look like a victim, that he was manipulating the story to make himself a hero. He didn't argue. He simply said, "I'm protecting my daughter from growing up thinking ridicule is love." Hearing him mention Mila made my throat close. I said he was cruel for using her as leverage. He said, "You already used her when you mocked her father in front of the world." The mediator suggested we focus on the custody plan. The words felt heavy, unreal. They discussed visitation schedules, financial division, and home ownership while I sat there trying to hold myself together. Every line Noah drew, every calm response, felt like a door closing in slow motion. At one point, I tried to appeal to the mediator. I said I'd been under stress, that I was only trying to make people laugh. She said, "Laughter can be healing, Mrs. Lane, or it can be cruel." I felt heat rush to my face. I wanted to defend myself, but every sentence I thought of sounded hollow. When the session ended, Noah stood, thanked the mediator, and gathered his papers. I asked if we could talk alone. He said there was nothing left to discuss. I said, "So that's it. You're just giving up." He said, "I gave you every chance to stop before this." Then he left. I stayed seated, numb, while my lawyer packed the documents. She told me quietly that Noah's case was solid, that I should prepare for the court's decision. I didn't respond. That night, I went home to an empty house. The quiet felt unbearable. I looked at my reflection in the dark window and thought about the woman everyone had laughed with at dinner. The one who thought she was clever. She didn't exist anymore. What remained was the silence she'd earned, and the man she'd pushed so far that even his revenge came without anger, only order, precision, and the calm of someone truly done. The court hearing felt shorter than I imagined, but every second cut deeper. I sat across from Noah, the man I'd mocked, loved, and taken for granted. He didn't once look at me. His lawyer spoke with calm precision, presenting the same evidence I'd already seen. The video, my posts, the witness statements. Hearing them read aloud in that quiet room made me want to vanish. When it was my turn, I said I hadn't meant to hurt anyone. I said humor was my way of coping, that I just wanted to feel noticed. The judge asked, "At the cost of your husband's dignity?" I couldn't answer. My throat closed. Noah spoke next. His voice was steady, without bitterness. He said he wasn't seeking revenge, only peace. "Respect," he said, "isn't something you demand. It's something you protect." The words stayed in the air long after he stopped speaking. The ruling came quickly. Noah was granted primary custody of Mila and full ownership of the house. My visitation rights were limited and monitored. The judge said my actions had caused public harm to private trust. After the session, Noah walked past me, paused, and said softly, "You wanted everyone to laugh, Verity. They did. Now they've stopped." Then he left. I sat alone in the empty courtroom, realizing that silence was the only response I'd earned, the silence I had spent years laughing over, until it finally laughed back. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.